City on a Hill Kids Church Online.
I'm Lola.
And I'm Jamie.
Today we're going to be continuing with our Bible overview.
But that will be after a time of worship.
Once upon a time, a handsome king who was choosing his bride. And of all the maids standing there, he chose me to be by his side.
Let courage be guiding your heart, for God will be always with you, providing the favors you'll find. His love will carry you through. You are His. Yes, sweet child, you are His. I'll pay all your plans to the Lord, 'cause through Him you're victorious. His powerful arm will bear yours. His love will carry you through. Let courage be guiding your heart, for God will be always with you, providing the favors you find. His love will carry you through. You are His. You are His. You are His. You are His. You are love. Dear child. Dearest child. You are His.
The last set of books that we are going to do in the Old Testament are Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. None of these are the last books of the Old Testament. Malachi is. Do you remember him? He was a prophet to the people of Judah to the Jews when they had returned from exile in Babylon. Can you remember any other prophet to the Jews on their return from Babylon? Yes, Zephaniah and Haggai. Starting with the book of Ezra. This was written when King Cyrus, the then king of Persia, allowed the Jews return from Babylon back to Jerusalem to build the temple of God. By this time, Persia was the world superpower. They had overtaken the Babylonian Empire. Ezra was a priest and a scribe. He made a point of learning the laws and the commandments of God, and he taught the Jews these things so as to make sure that no bad thing happens to the nation of Jews ever again. It was in the book of Ezra that we first heard that the altar and then the temple were rebuilt. The prophets Haggai and Zechariah encouraged the people to do just this. Ezra went back to Jerusalem about 50 years after the temple had been rebuilt, and he taught the people there in Jerusalem and Judah the commandments and the laws of God. Nehemiah was another book that was written when the exiles had returned to Jerusalem from Babylon. He was the cupbearer to the king of Persia. He was important in that he rebuilt the gates and the wall around the city of Jerusalem that had been burnt and knocked down by the Babylonians. You know what else? The people who had come to take the place of the Jews when they had been taken off to exile were giving Nehemiah and the people of Judah a lot of trouble. They were trying to stop them from rebuilding the city walls and erecting the gates. I can hear some of you asking, what's the importance of a city wall? Well, it was important in those days because the wall would protect the people within the city, and people outside the city saw how strong the people within the city were. And believe it or not, it was also a sign of the strength of the God that the people within the city served. Even though the Bible does not tell us how long or how high the city wall of Jerusalem was, we know that loads and loads and loads of people were involved in the rebuild of these. We had men, women, we had priests, scribes, Levites, goldsmiths, perfume makers, rulers, ordinary people, all sorts of people rolled up their sleeves, pitched in and rebuilt the city walls, the towers and the gates. An amazing thing was that despite all the trouble, all the opposition, all the problems that the people around were giving Nehemiah and the people, the wall was finished in 52 days. 52 days. You know, that is less than a school term. As a matter of fact, it's 10 days more than your summer holidays. So that was an amazing thing. Now to the book of Esther. This book contains history. It contains stories of how a Jewish girl, one of the exiles, became queen of the most powerful nation, the most powerful empire in the world. Her name was Queen Esther. It also talks about how a man by the name of Haman tried to get rid of all the Jews in the Persian Empire. And it also talks about how another man, Mordecai, rose to a very, very, very powerful position within the Persian Empire. Mordecai was Esther's cousin. So we end the Old Testament with the return of the Jews from exile in Babylon, at least those who wanted to return. And that's the end of the story.
Hi everybody, how are you doing? So today Ivy was speaking at these three books, wasn't she? The very end of the history section of the Bible with Ezra, Nehemiah and Esther. And we'll come back to that in a moment. But first of all, we're finishing off learning the prophets, the end of the Old Testament. And last time we got up to Obadiah. And so we're starting halfway through the prophets today. And we start off with three quite easy ones. Jonah, Micah, Nahum. Let's try that. Jonah, Micah, Nahum. Yeah, that's quite easy, isn't it? But then we get some tricky ones because we go into Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah. And it might help you to remember that it starts with an H and then with a Z and then another H and then another Z. I don't know if that helps you. Let's just try them. I'll say them and then you say them. Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah. Good. And then the last one is Malachi, and that's quite easy as well. Let's just try it all the way from Jonah. Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. It's kind of a relief to get to Malachi, isn't it? Well done. Let's try the whole Old Testament from start to finish. Here we go. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus and Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth and Samuel. Samuel, Kings, Kings, Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms and Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Hey, well done! Now, let's zoom back in to the end of the history section, the end of the history of the people of Israel in the Old Testament. And we hear about these three characters, don't we? Here we have Ezra, the priest, Nehemiah, who I'm calling the professional, and Esther, the princess. The priest, the professional, and the princess. And do you know what they're all doing? They are all praying. Because if you dive into their books, something you will see they all had in common was even though they had been exiled, bad things had happened to their people, the Israelites, they'd been separated from the land that God had for them. Although things had gone wrong, these three were prayers. And they prayed and they prayed and they actually changed history. So we're just going to make these three little people to remind us of these stories and how they prayed. And it made a big difference. I'm sure you will have made paper dolls like this before. It's always quite fun. First of all, you need a piece of paper and you need to fold it as many times as the number of dolls you want to make. So we're making 3 people, so we need to fold it into thirds. So to fold it into thirds, you fold 1/2 over so that the 2 sides are equal. And then you want to fold the other one over and squash it down and you'll have it in thirds. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw our person onto the front, and what I've done is, even though these three people are quite different, they all have the same basic outline. You can see that the headdress of Ezra and Nehemiah is kind of equivalent to Esther's hair, and their robe is kind of equivalent to Esther's dress. So we'll start off by putting in the big long robe, and then we come up for their arms, which we're having lifted into the air in prayer, and we'll draw in their hands, and the hands are the bit that are going to link them together. So it's very important that the two hands touch the edge on both sides. Okay, then depending on which character it is, we would have their head, but then we're going to give a headdress. So I'm going to put an extra bit over the top, which will be like the kind of headscarf for the men and hair for Esther. And so you can see it comes down behind as well. Good. We can obviously draw in all sorts of other things. So for example, for the priest, we might be putting in his beard and things, but we don't need to worry about that yet. The first thing we need is just to get the outline. So we'll get the outline and then we'll cut it out. Oops, and I've got one already cut out that fall on the floor. So you'll have a shape like this, and when we unfold it, ta-doo, we've got 3 of them. So then we're going to start drawing in the different features. So as I said, for our priest, I'm just putting in sort of like a shepherd would wear in a nativity play, a kind of a headband and then a scarf down the back. I've given him a belt, I've given him a beard. That's Ezra. For Nehemiah, he worked in the royal palace. He was the cupbearer to the king. So he might be a little bit smarter, some decorations perhaps. So maybe on his cuffs, and then we'll give him a fancy belt. I'm just doing zigzag patterns. Then we'll put in, we need his head. We're going to have a headband again, and we can give him the same zigzag pattern. Here's his head with his beard. There's his shoulder on the other side. There's the bottom of his robe. Oops, with his shoes just sticking out. And then for Queen Esther, well, we'll give her a crown at the top first of all. We'll put in her cuffs. She doesn't have a beard obviously, so we have her neck coming round, coming out underneath her crown. Earrings on her ears. We've got her hair coming down. There's her hair coming out from under the crown. Maybe jewels hanging off her collar as well. And perhaps, off her sash as well. Okay, she was the wife of the most powerful, wealthy man in the world at the time. So she would probably have very rich clothes. And of course, she was known to be very beautiful. So here we have it. 3 people, all the same shape, but we've got our priest, our professional, and our princess. And there they are, praying to God together. And then, of course, you can colour them in however you like and put them up to remind you that whatever's happening round about you, whoever you are, whatever your role or your job or your class at school, you can be a prayer. And like Ezra, Nehemiah and Esther, maybe God will use you to change history. So, enjoy making some paper people, keep on praying, and I'll see you next week. Bye!
We have come to the end of the Old Testament.
Well, technically, we have finished all the books of the Old Testament because Malachi is the last book of the Old Testament.
Oh, that's right. Because we did Esther, Nehemiah, and Ezra, right?
Yep.
Ezra and Nehemiah were priests.
Jamie, it was Ezra that was a priest, scribe, and teacher.
Oh.
But Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the king of Persia.
Oh, that makes more sense. But Lola, I've got one question.
What?
What is a cupbearer?
A cupbearer is a very important position. He is the one that tastes the king's wine and food before the king then goes and eats and drinks, to make sure that it's safe for him to drink. That is the king.
That means he must have spent most of his time with the king.
That's right, but that was his job. Jamie, do you think you can say all the books of the Old Testament?
Well, I'll try. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth and Samuel. Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, Ezra. Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, and Proverbs. Ecclesiastes, Songs of Songs, Isaiah, Jeremiah. Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, and Joel. Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum. Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi.
Wow. Well done, Jamie. What about you guys at home? Why don't you give it a try? That's it for this week.
Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.